Bear County Finance Committee meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call the roll, please. Here.
John McMahon.
Here.
Stacy Hessel,
Here.
Tom Duffy,
Here.
Gail Schleter.
Let the record indicate we have a quorum. We have pledge allegiance will be on the screen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Number 4, certification, compliance, open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the news media and public as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Number 5 is a meeting agenda. The agenda is set. Number 6, public comment. Ms. Zomer.
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Edgewater property owner. Earlier this morning, I sent committee members a couple bits of information on the 2022 tourism impact as well as sales tax trends for Sawyer County. Some years ago, I think maybe Mr. Schleter and Mr. Kinsley were on the board at the time. UW Extension and the Sawyer County Development Corporation did a study of the impact of second homes on the economy for Sawyer County. And I think during the budget process, it might be helpful to better understand all the components of the county and not to put all your eggs in one basket, because I think with trends, you're going to lose that second home ownership. People are going to move. Memorial Day weekend, with the impacts of tourism, there was no peace, was no quiet, there was dust, there was noise, and no cell phone signal. And I've heard lots of complaints from both residents and from tourists that you come up here and your phone calls are dropped and you can't use your smartphone to access apps. And so to look at tourism and always increasing tourism as a focus, I think is misguided. And then the second thing is that with regard to the budget process, since the years that Sawyer County has shifted to having an administrator form of government, county board supervisors have been somewhat disconnected from better understanding mandatory and priority services in departments and understanding the costs. And I know when Supervisor Bruce Paulson was on this committee and on the board, every year he would ask, as part of the budget timeline process, that this committee and or board get involved with the assumptions that are given to the departments in compiling their budgets. And I think that request was made numerous years, and in subsequent years it didn't happen. So the budget is a policy document that represents the county board's commitment to services provided by county government. And unless you know the mandatory services and what priorities are, I don't know how departments are supposed to come up with a budget. I think a zero-based budget of departments being honest about we need this many people to provide these services would be a starting point, instead of either holding things constant or asking departments to decrease, because services are suffering. And again, that's going to impact whether people live here, have second homes here, or the quality of their visit. Thank you.
Thank you. There's nobody online. Number 7, approve the minutes of the previous meeting of May 11th.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Ms. Hessel to approve as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8, Finance Department report. Welcome.
Thank you. First, we'll look at sales price. The update, the new. And last month. Excuse me.
All right. So last month we had a little drop from what we had been the highest ever in the last 5 years, the previous 3 months. Last month was a little drop. This month we're back up on top again. Casting forward, we're still going to be just under 3 million projected for sales tax. That went up a little bit from last month. And as I said before, with this model, each month we add gets a little more accurate. So Any questions on sales tax?
Move forward.
All right. The budget updates then 22, we actually had the auditors on site Monday and Tuesday. So they have begun their field work. They'll be here again next Monday and possibly Tuesday, but probably not Tuesday. So we're really wrapping up now. We've made everything we think we need to make. We'll probably have a few adjustments from the auditors once they go through. I did ask when they might have a good final number for us, and April said about 3 weeks. So by the next meeting, we should really know where we're at and what our surplus is, hopefully, and move forward from there. Going through the slides, I'll just go through these quickly for 22 because they really haven't changed. We're right at, you can click the next one. The revenue side, the Department 00 shows at 94%. We're actually over 100% on that because of the transfer that we're not going to have to do. So we don't have to pull from fund balance, which was a large item of $1.285 million. I don't see any reason unless something really big comes up in the audit that we would have to do any transfer. So that's good news. If you want to go to the next slide. Pull it over. So the bottom line with all departments in the general fund, we're at 97%. And again, that's not including the adjustment for that fund balance draw. Next slide. On the expense side, we came in at about 90%. And that again is net of that poll, because that poll is really just going to be a flow through from general fund balance to the general fund to transfer to Health and Human Services. And we will not need to do that. So
With Health and Human Services is healthy then?
they are, yep.
Good.
Our placements were down quite a bit from previous years.
Good.
So in going into 24 in the budget cycle, we should be able to reduce that transfer request or the fund balance transfer request, because Health and Human Services now has a pretty decent fund balance of their own. If you recall from the 21 surplus, the board elected to designate 1.3 million to Health and Human Services. And that, along with how they came out this year, we should be in good shape to not have to request any transfer from general fund for 24. Assuming 23 comes out the way we think it will. And just an update again, I did not include that LATCF funding anymore. That was 377,000. That used to be carried in general fund. We set that up in its own fund in the 200 level. So it's more of a agency fund type thing. Next slide. Moving into 23. The data we're looking at is through May now. So that's 42% of the budget. We're in good shape. Stumpage sales are way up, which is great. We were lagging a little last year until the end, and then we caught up at the end. This year we're ahead. So strong winter sales this year. So moving to the next one on the revenue side, we're at 37% on just the 00 portion of the general fund. And again, towards the end, I'm going to back out that transfer, assuming maybe we won't have to make that again, so that it shows a more realistic view of where we're at. Next slide. The other revenues on the general side add up to, we're at about 36%. And again, that is including that transfer that hopefully we don't have to make. Expense side, we're doing really well. Everybody's pretty much right on target, if not a little under even. Overall, we're under, but again, part of that is that transfer to the other special revenue fund, which we won't have to do, hopefully. And then the last one, I kind of show the net there then, so on the surface, we're at 36% of revenue, we're really at more like 40% when I back out that transfer, and then the same on the expense side, we're showing 33%, really it's more like 36%, which is still well under budget. Health and Human Services right now is running at a deficit. They're very heavy grant funded. Grants always lag behind the expenses. Claims, by the time you claim them, then get the revenue, it's always a little behind. So that's not surprising for this time of year. And right now, highway is running with a surplus, which is good. We all know it's kind of a brutal winter. We've almost gone through our whole budget for winter cleanup already, and we haven't hit the fall side of winter yet. So hopefully we can stay a little bit above with that before we hit that point. Any questions on either budget?
I have one.
Sure.
You said highway department has a surplus right now?
They're running surplus right now. Yeah.
I would have thought after this winter, they wouldn't have any surplus at all.
Well, that's what I said earlier. We're actually almost spent all of our winter, even though we haven't hit the fall portion of winter, but overall, I mean, we haven't started really summer projects yet either at this point, so that's probably part of it.
Okay, I guess I missed the terrible winter, but we got a surplus. Okay, never mind.
Anything else?
Don't worry, the highway department will spend the money.
Yeah. Moving on to the CIP, just had a couple happen in May. Both relating to, or one relating to a squad, and then we started doing some dam work. So just a couple small ones there.
Which dam are we working on? I mean, the money set aside for.
I believe that's Brunette.
Yeah,
Okay. Is there any other ones coming up fairly soon?
Not for the next year, but potentially in 2025.
Yeah, 2025, we have a big one coming.
Good.
In
Thank
the
you.
works. And then looking at budget parameters a little bit, first I'll throw out the timetable. This is very similar to what you're used to in the past. The one changes, we did ask for CIP already, that was done in April. And that was for that debt issue that the county board approved at the last meeting. We needed to get an accurate, fairly accurate number for that. We do have a little bit of work to do with it still because the request came in a little high. We were trying to catch up some deferred maintenance more in 1 year. Well, I've talked with Tim already, and we can push some of those into the next year or two to come into where we need to be, which is 1.5 is what I had based that debt issue on. And we'll be able to, should be able to get down to that.
They've been asked to do a lot of extra stuff that they normally wouldn't be doing.
Well, what we did is we changed how we do the CIP for maintenance.
Okay.
Because what it was going through each department before for building stuff. And then, so they would contact him, he would get quotes. Well, then in the end, a lot of it wasn't actually getting into the CIP through the departments. So Tim is really just taking over all building maintenance now
Okay,
through the CIP. So then he'll have a better understanding of what's actually hitting it in the end before it's at the end.
as long as we can track it.
Yeah.
I think particularly true, like the sheriff's department. They were kind of responsible for their own CIP for building. It's in the company. It's part of that area. I think that's kind of overseen all of our facilities.
Yeah.
We'll still be able to track it. And identify it.
It didn't hit their individual budgets anyhow. It all came out of the CIP budget, so. It doesn't have any effect that way. Other than that, if the finance committee approves the plan going forward, then I would issue directions to the department heads, maybe this afternoon even, would be the plan. Ask for new staffing requests by the end of June. And then the whole budget would be due back by the end of July. At that point, we would be meeting with department heads. Andy would be with me and them, and we would keep the finance committee updated on all of those individual committees too, if need be. And then start bringing it to the full board in September with the requested budget. Get out the newspapers. Very similar to how it was under Mike, how we did it last year, unless there's opposition, anything you'd like to add?
Need a motion? We will, but let me stop.
I'll go through the next slide too before we get to that point. So here are some of the guidelines with Andy we kind of came up with. Basic information, like I said, set out today. Request for staffing due back June 30th. The full budget July 28th. Departments have done a very good job of this in the past, asking for what they need to make their department run. We would ask they kind of continue in that vein. I've already drafted a letter to go out that I didn't bring to this meeting, but just thanking them for the work they've done in the past and ask them to continue that. We're not expecting them to not ask for anything they need to do their job, but we're asking for needs, not wants at this point, and the wants, I guess, would come in with the staffing probably more than anything. I've worked on the personnel worksheets. I actually kind of changed them more to what I had done in the past. It used to be just a one-page form. Now I've got several tabs in an Excel spreadsheet, broken down kind of by departments, and also have union negotiations in there. So everything calculates all of it. Got a lot of tables and lookups. So it took a while to build it this year, but in the future, it'll be just a matter of putting in the new grid and then changing any steps that there might be, and it'll pull all the data in. I've also got a tab for all the county data with health insurance and everything, all the WRS rates, life insurance, everything. So all that pulls right in. So in future years, it'll make it pretty easy. And
Chairman,
Stacy, go.
I just had a question. So there's about a handful of constituents and non-constituents that take up some of the operating budget just based on legal requests or open record requests and time from the workers from getting other projects done. Is there a way to calculate that and to recoup some of that money in their operating budgets? You know, like, because, I mean, it's only a few people, but it takes up a lot of our time and budget.
Anything we can't readily generate, we are charging for.
Okay.
And we could put it back into the departments. I guess I haven't really thought of that. We haven't had anything that's been that big of a charge yet.
I didn't know if like the legal fees, if there's, I'm thinking specifically for zoning, if there's issues there, but I just didn't know if there was a calculation that we could do. There's just a few of the people that, you know, are
Well,
taking a lot of time and budget.
Any legal fees for records request wouldn't be charged to the department. I don't believe.
No.
That's just coming out of general. So it's really not affecting their individual budgets right now.
So then a question is, when it does get to that legal fee, does that person that is making that request that we have to ask legal, do they get charged then for that, or the county?
No, we cannot charge for that.
Even if they're a non-constituent of the county?
Right, doesn't matter.
Just
Public request is a public request. The only thing we can charge for is essentially the time to locate the record. If we have to consult with counsel on the request, that cost is not recoverable. So we can only charge for, like, if it takes staff time to locate a record, we can charge for that, or prepare a record that does not exist. And we inform the requester of that charge, and then they can decide if they want to pay it. Then if they do, then we go ahead and prepare the
Yeah, I think it's something we should entertain calculating just so that we know what the cost is for this handful of people.
Yeah, we can. I think we've done that.
Yeah.
We haven't done that, but I believe that was done a few years ago. They had to.
Yeah,
somebody
'cause
requested to look at
I
that.
think that's transparency for our county is saying, hey, look at, this is how much we're spending our time and our efforts and our funds that could go to a different project. I guess I would just
Yeah.
encourage if we could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I would just like, I can't say for sure like on zoning, but I know just recently we've had some requests for like personnel records or personnel data related to employees. So there definitely we do involve council because there's a more, somebody to review the file to see what can be released, what notifications we have to give to the employee that their
Mhm.
file's been requested.
Sure.
So there are some costs we have been incurring.
Okay, thank you.
Like, for instance, this week I had a request for something that is not in a report. I was able to generate it fairly easily, took me
Mhm.
15 minutes, but I did charge the 15 minutes of my time. for it.
Mhm. All right, thank you.
And we are keeping a spreadsheet on the ones that go through me now that says who has requested, whether or not attorneys were involved, whether or not being collected or charged for a fee, so we're keeping a track of requests going forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure the county would appreciate that.
So moving on here. On the personnel worksheet, right now I've got a 5% increase in health insurance. We're still tracking really well. I'm really gonna push hard for a 0 this for 24. Plus, we're looking at other options at the same time too. But so I've got it where I think it'd be safe to have it, but not so much where it's overinflating our budget either. And hopefully it comes in under that. We're basing these parameters on current state law because obviously the new budget has not been passed yet. The one thing that could have an effect on us is if shared revenues are increased. Unfortunately for Sawyer County in a property rich area, it's not going to have a huge impact on us, but anything is appreciated.
5% increase is wonderful. Wasn't that long ago, we were looking at 15% and more increases. How did we do that? Did our employee population just all of a sudden get healthier or?
It's a large part of that. We've been blessed the last couple of years with pretty healthy people. With a population our size, 1 or 2 bad cases can have a huge impact on our rates because just, we've got about a $3 million policy. So, it's not hard to get to $1 million claim if there's really something, a cancer or something that can really throw. But 2 years ago, I believe we had a 0.62 utilization ratio. I think the year after that it was 0.72, and this year we're tracking I think right around 60 at this point. It's early, but we've done well. And you have to push back on your provider too, because of the carrier, because they will, they look at their whole book of business and say, well, this is what we need. I will always pull ourselves out with our data and say, but this is what you made on us. That's, you have to do better than that. You have to push back because they'll come forward with, if nothing else, they'll come forward with a trend, and trend, which means if you have the same staff and the same procedures this year versus last year, it's going to cost 6 or 7% more. That's just healthcare trend. But if you're doing well, you can push back on that too. And like the general rule is, if you have 88% utilization, that's considered flat because they have overhead costs and everything that they need covered. But if you can get at that, then you should be at a flat renewal. And that's why I really pushed back last year because we did so much better than that.
When you say utilization, people actually making claims.
Yeah, if we have a $3 million policy and we come in at 0.62, well, I'll say 0.6, it's easier, utilization. That would mean our care cost for 1.8 million. So if we paid in 3 million in premiums, we cost 1.8 million, that means there's 1.2 million residual left over. And I don't want the insurance company to make 1.2 million. So that's where you push back and say, you made this much this year. I need you to take a little more risk next year. Because what they'll do is they'll come in. They weight the most recent months heaviest. And it feels like unless those are really good months, then they don't weight them as heavy. But then they'll throw in their trend and then they'll throw in another percent increase. So you can have really good data. But by the time it gets to their renewal calculation and in defense of them, they're also calculating forward 18 months to get to that point. But they can go from a 62% utilization, calculate all renewal and say, well, we need a 7% increase to cover what our expected costs are going to be next year. Part of that, what weighs into that also is high cost claimants, whether they're ongoing or done, or, you know, all that stuff weighs in. And we didn't have that last year either. I think we had one that qualified as a high cost claimant, and that's what they consider anything over 75,000. So we did well that way. We did well overall. That's why I'm sure I showed my frustration last year when, and we got it down to 2.5% increase, but still, I really felt strongly we should have improved the plan. So we'll use that data again this year and push even harder.
Personally, I think you've done a hell of a job, so thank you.
Well, a lot of it is due to the help of our staff. You just have to know what to point out and then get the job done. But thank you.
I'll emphasize that you've done wonderful, because where we had before was amazing to what we have now. So thank you for that. I do have a question, if I may,
Sure.
on your timeline. For the tentative 2024 budget, at some point, because we'll have potentially have a new board next April. So somewhere prior to the budget being done, we have to talk to the full board and see if they want to have a raise increase for per diem, or if it's going to stay with the per diem. So somewhere in your timeline, we need to have that on the agenda.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion of when you would like that?
Well, probably August or September. Wouldn't want to wait any later than that.
Do you want to have that discussion maybe first and make a recommendation of second for discuss?
I think it's always nice if it comes out of a committee. So maybe this is June, we could even have it on agenda next month.
It probably should come out in July if we're asking for departments to have it back by the end of the
Yeah, okay. All right. Let's see. What we got next? Does anybody have any questions on what we just covered, or any comments? We'll move on to number 9.
All right, looking at our investment portfolio. Rates continue to go up just a little bit each month. Our bottom line for the month was $90,000 in interest, so another just phenomenal month. I did have a conversation with our local bank about some CDs through them. Just to see if they can match what we can get elsewhere. So we'll hopefully have that information for next meeting.
But these rates aren't too bad either.
They're not. I just, like we discussed, to be honest, we'll probably get a little bit lower rate with some of the CDs, but it'll be locked in case something turns on the money market side. So just have a little bit of diversification in case
Good.
something happens where these go down. Market's been strong this week, so hopefully it'll stay strong for a little while.
Good.
All right. Any questions on the investment report?
Making us money.
We're trying. All right, can move on to ambulance then. Before I begin this, we're going to probably start seeing a little shift. Initially, we were looking at this to see how the new company is doing versus the old. Well, now we've reached a point where we're at a year with the new company. So the data is going to start getting skewed. Because this is going to be the last month where you can really see the downward trend that happened and now we're up again. That's going to start to even out because we're going to have more months with the new company and fewer with the old for the next year over. So that's going to start changing a little bit. So and I wasn't here, but what I've heard is, there's a change in ownership of the previous company. Our revenues kept declining, the percentage of collections were declining. So that's why we made the change. So as it became drastic, and then as we've added months of the new vendor, there's been quite a gap widening. That is going to start shrinking because 2 years ago, it wasn't that bad with the previous biller. It just was more in the last year that it really dropped off. So that effect is going to start shrinking, but it's still good data to look at. And I'll try to figure out a way to keep looking at it of maybe it's just going to be harder because as the months shrink, I was going to say I could keep looking at it, the new one versus the last period of the old one, but this month is 12 months, next month will be 11, each month is going to shrink. So then the data becomes less reliable as you're looking at your months at a time. This is probably the best data we've had because it's now a full year. So that said, I'll take you through it. So now we're looking through April for each of the last 3-year, 12-month cycles. So first we'll look at our aging report. And again, when I look at this, what I'm looking at is the percentage of current. You want that as high as possible. And the trend is that we're definitely up in that area. And also the overall amount you'd like to be shrinking. And this month did go down a lot on the overall total. The percentage went up a little bit of current, which is good. And so again, looking at this, looking at the trend, the new collection company is doing a good job for us. We're not having those long outstanding bills that aren't getting collected.
Well, at the same time, when we look at this, are we fully staffed with families?
We're pretty close.
We're short a couple paramedics. That's the biggest
Paramedic
thing.
side is where we're short.
Yep.
Are we still running the chase cars?
We don't run chase cars. We run the Hayward and Ojibwa run 24/7 with paramedic and an EMT. And then middle of the day at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. they run what they call a power truck. So there's a third unit on that floats.
So that's gotta be saving us some money.
Yeah, I mean, our staffing costs are in line. We have been running a fair amount of overtime with paramedics just because we are not fully staffed. We do have applications. I think we'll be able to get closer to filling out that in the next couple of months.
Yeah, staffing has been in line with the revenue. I'll say that. So even though revenue's been down a little, staffing costs have been down a little, so it evens out. We don't have, other than anecdotal, if we could have maybe one more consistent truck running with a paramedic, we might get more transfers, which would increase the revenue. So that would probably, well, it would cover, because transfers, the percentage of collections a lot higher. It's pretty much 100%. You're gonna make up that cost of the new truck by doing that, and
Question, if I may. So when we do run transfers, don't we have two ambulances that are four-wheel drive? We're not using them for that, are we?
that I don't know.
I don't believe so. No, the four-wheel drives are not our primary units on a daily basis. They use those more when there's extreme conditions or in the wintertime.
Just no sense of wearing them out transfers.
Yeah, so yeah, we're not doing transfers with the trucks.
Thank you.
We aren't doing a lot of transfers at all right now. We'd like to see more.
Is that because the other ambulance companies do it for a lesser cost?
I don't know the cost factor.
Or
No.
because
We have competition, obviously.
Yeah,
the
there's,
companies have better availability?
that appears to be the primary reason, is that consistency of being available. It's at the hospital's discretion who they call for transfers. And if we are not consistently able to do them, they'll generally call a service that is more consistently available. But our ambulance director has been in communication with especially the local hospital to try to improve that. So we've been picking up some, not necessarily transfers outside the area, but we're doing some local transfers, like when people go from a nursing home to the hospital, they need a way to get back from the hospital to the nursing home. So we've been doing some of those and being able to bill for them. And then we have picked up a few more transfers, but we definitely, if we had a full stable of staff, especially the paramedic or RNs that can ride in the ambulance and provide, they have to be able to do certain things in the ambulance for a lot of the transfers. If we have those staff, then we can be more consistently available and maybe be at the top of the call list. Our transfers primarily are from Hayward or from Ladysmith.
That doesn't necessarily mean that our bottom line would increase a lot, because fully staffed with the right people, you're gonna be paying more out of salaries.
We would pay more, but transfers pay for themselves. So I mean, right now our priority is maintaining our 911 service, which doesn't have as good recovery. I mean, we're covering half of what the actual bill is, whereas a transfer is part of the hospital bill. So the hospital is responsible to pay us for the transfer. So even if we were on, overtime, the billing rate for a transfer will pay for the staff costs that we incur.
And the fixed costs we're already paying. So any additional revenue. Good.
Okay,
Right, you can go to the next slide then. So this is the average calls per month. The reason 21, 22 went way down is there was that period where we weren't doing any billing, that weren't logging the calls. Well, then when I'm blanking on the call carrier now. The billing company. And so are you. Anyhow, the new billing company. Can't think of it. So anyhow, they came in and billed all at once when they started in April. So then I put all that data in and then divided by the 12-month cycle. So it did have an effect on the numbers a little bit, but it's now that it's a year, it's probably a more realistic view. So you can see there had been, even on calls, the last 3 years, a little bit of a decline consistently. Then if you want to move to the next slide. This is the amount billed per month. And that had dropped from the previous month, but now we're up this last 12-month cycle. So even though the calls are down from the last 12-month cycle, the amount billing per month is up. So that's good news. And part of that is due to we did increase our rates last year. Next slide. Oops. This is the average amount collected per month. And there you can see there was a 3-year trend downwards, and we gained quite a bit on that now. So this is where you're starting to see our new collection company is doing a good job. Next slide. This is percent collected per month by 12-month cycle. And this is where you really see the effect of the change in billing companies. So like I had mentioned back in 1920, the billing company is doing a pretty good job. And then the next year it slid a little, and then last year it slid even more. And now we're way up even beyond where we were 3 years ago over the 12-month cycle. So that's good news. And then this is the dollars billed and collected per call. So the dollars billed per call is up. And again, part of that is due to us increasing rates. But then when you look over at the amount collected per call, that's way up. A much higher percentage than the amount billed per call. So that again shows that our billing collection percentages has gone up. And then the final one is just a quick income statement for ambulance through April 30th. And here you can see that while we are running under budget on ambulance fees, overall, we're doing fine, and we actually have a little bit of a surplus going right now. Right, plus, there we go. Any questions on any of this?
Does public safety get a report of how many runs out of each building or each area?
I don't think they're
That's
getting,
been one of the requests.
yeah,
I can't remember if we talked about last couple of years going back. There was some question on staffing levels, how often, so we didn't go over that, but there's been some question on calls for the facility and also calls for those calls. We can determine the calls on each building.
It'll be interesting, just the ones on the, where they're pulling them out, or Stone Lake, or Round Lake, or Woodville, Haven.
I did get some data on where they're going, and I haven't looked at it a whole lot yet, but what I'm able to do is pull that PDF, dump it into an Excel, and then I can sort it by where it's going to, and then kind of determine that way counts. So,
Just a thought.
yeah.
Anybody have any questions for? All right. So we're gonna have financial funds and update.
You want to take it, you want me to? Yeah.
Yeah, what you said, make sure you saw the balance of the ARPA funds. The money has gone out in the last month. Have money that dispersed for doing broadband projects. And the balance is for the building project. So you saw that at last month's board meeting in place. Break out the bond money and how it's some of the rest of the building outside of what's the bond for. Or covered by ARPA is going to be bonded for. Opioid funds, we have that money just sitting in the account of $121,000. The next disbursement for this year is, we just received notice, is $21,000. That'll come in the next month. We're regrouping on that with the change in Julia going to the director of HHS and new public health officer. There's some juggling of staff who we're really working on the opioid plan with the CJCC. So once that's all settled out now, so I think you'll see something coming back for a budget for use of those funds. The local area tribal consistency fund, that's the $377,000 that Mike had mentioned we put into a segregated account. There's another allocation of that will come after after July 1, after the start of the federal fiscal year. Those monies are unallocated, and we've tried just to keep them on the side. That might be future, I mean, we could talk about future uses. That's probably one-time money that was funded through the bill at the federal level, the bipartisan infrastructure law. Really are not any restrictions on it. But it is one-time money. And then letter D, review surplus funds and uses. I think that was requested to be put on last month. So like Mike had mentioned, auditors are finishing their work. You know, depending on how you want to view the term surplus funds, whether really are surplus right now, primarily what we've discussed, correct me if I'm wrong on how I'll explain this, but there was a transfer as part of the 22 budget of monies from the general fund to HHS to support their budget. That's essentially the money that's not going to be transferred. That's money we are under budget for 2022. So that just leaves the money in the general fund. So we don't have any uses to propose, except that it's there for future budgets.
Yeah, and after we get our numbers from the auditor, we'll discuss any potential items we might want to put some to, but I'd like to push that out to next month until we get the number from the audits.
I think, so just like in 2020, the 21 budget had was it a $3 million surplus? I'm not even comfortable using that word surplus because it's really not surplus, but the board allocated some money to replenish the human services fund for placements, so that money has not been touched since that transfer was done. You transferred money into the resource development fund that traditionally funded the dam projects. And then last year, after we transferred money into it, and then a month after we did that, the Bernay Lake Dam project was bid out and came in significantly higher. So the resource fund was essentially emptied back out to pay for that project. And then we did the one-time retention payments to the staff. So I'm not planning to propose that this year. As far as any across the board staff payment, we did do a 2-1 pay adjustment for these staff this year. So they already received the 2% and will receive the 1% July 1.
What's the name of the money that the state requires us to keep on hand? What is that called? The
Fund balance.
fund balance, is that it? And what percentage are we at there? Are we where we should be?
Yeah, we're where we should be. I don't know the percentage offhand. I'm trying to maybe calculate in my head.
Well, that's
I
probably,
don't know if I want to quote
that's
it.
probably not the right question. I'm probably not asking the question.
Yeah, it's not a state requirement. It's
Yeah.
generally accepted accounting principles, or generally, I think we have a policy even in place. I can't cite it, but you want to keep like a 90-day operating supply,
Yeah,
operating
I think
fund
our
on that.
policy says 30% of operating
Yeah.
expenditures.
I think we were at 39 last year. For a while, anyway.
Does the interest that we're making on those other accounts or those CDs, does that go into the general fund, or is that tagged for something else?
Depends what it's tied to.
Okay,
If it's a debt issue for the construction, it goes to that. If it's general fund, it goes to general.
okay, thank you.
There's a deadline coming up, isn't it, for ARPA funds? When's the deadline for that, you recall?
You had to have them allocated by the end of 2024 and spent by 26. But we've already allocated all of ours. I mean, actually, we had a brief conversation, just a heads up, because the debt ceiling bill that the president just signed has ARPA clawback provisions in it. So any ARPA money that might, and I don't know the details of it, but like you've maybe seen the news at state level. The state has 400 and some $1 million that they have not spent of the ARPA funds. And they're trying to figure out how to allocate them because of the bill that was signed at the federal level has provisions to claw back any unused ARPA funds. But I think we're fine. I don't think it's going to go to the local level. I think it's more at the state level. But all of our ARPA, we have resolutions that allocates all of it.
You can tell them they can fix the state road around there.
They were up filling potholes doing the pothole tour last week. I don't think they came here though.
Definitely did not.
And
Not on
I
Highway
just-
77.
Maybe one additional comment too on the interest. So we are making good interest. We are aware that like the Register of Deeds has pointed out to us that they'll probably miss their budget mark this year because filings are significantly down because there's not as much refinancing going on. So there's like the trade-offs we're already aware of.
And anybody have any questions regarding any?
No, just kudos. Thank you for all you guys do.
Do a good job explaining it, don't they? Future agenda items. We'll have the budget on there.
Can we get a report on court fines, civil and criminal? How are the collections going? How much of a balance do we have out there is,
Uh, Put that on the agenda, we'll find out.
okay. Let's put that on the agenda for next month.
Think of something else to put on?
Just what I requested earlier, but
That's
so does that, Andy, does that rule that you can't bill, is it just for residents of the county or can you bill outside residents?
Can't.
Bill anybody? Okay.
There's a, I can, today, there's a. Attorney General's got a whole document on records requests, you can't do. So we technically a records request, they don't even have to tell us who they are. There's no way to try to word it.
Right, so does it apply though if somebody brings a complaint to the county and that requires us to do something other than our normal faculties, we can't bill them for that?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll just say this. Somebody brings a record request in, it's we try to handle it internal if we can, but if it's more complicated or if it's questionable, if it's a public record or requires that legal review, that's essentially our choice. Get legal involved. When we respond to the record request, we want to make sure we're not creating a legal issue for ourselves, so you get some help on that. So the involvement of legal is not really based on the requester, it's based on our choice to get legal assistance to address.
When does it become harassment of employees? Is there a line?
It really isn't. I guess the state of where we're at. I mean, there's YouTube videos on what you can and can't go to your local, and it's not state specific. But I mean, there are transparency efforts and watchdogs and things like that. Where they explain to people what they can and can't do, like what you can ask for, what your rights are as a requester. So I don't, a person can literally come in here every day and ask for a public document.
Yeah, we have those. So,
It's not us to do anything.
and we can't keep track to see what the cost is costing the county.
You can start tracking, and that's what we're trying to do. So what we've done this in the last few months internally is pull all departments, all of our records requests so she can start tracking them. Because it's, part of it's tracking them to make sure it's, so we know how many are out there, but also that we're responding to them. And we get a wide variety, and this we don't, maybe we could report back on that, but we get them from media outlets. We're just looking for information on stories, or they're doing their investigative reports. We received one this week from a company that's looking for all of our cell tower records. I assume, they're looking for the rates that we're paying, or probably doing market research. We're getting for citizens who are inquiring for their own personal interests. So it's a wide variety. And some they're able to grab it and say, here it is. And someone takes a little more work to figure out what they want. So we have been asked, going back to people and saying, would you please clarify your requests so we can narrow it down. It will take us a lot of time to respond. But it's not an issue here. It's an issue with a lot of. But we're getting more advisement from WCA and their charities and some other guests.
So the cost is minimal then?
No, it's
So maybe we
not.
should Post that in.
I think,
Cost the county.
well, and I just think there's like a fine line between asking for open request because you're curious and going to the window of one of the administration offices, let's say zoning, and asking for everything to try to catch them doing something wrong. When does it become us safeguarding our employees and our budget versus these people that are harassing? That's the only reason I'm asking for.
Yeah, across that.
Mhm.
It's, even you look at, it's like, I think in the state budget process right now, is you. It's not part of the budget, but there's state legislation that address some of this. Requests for records and they didn't supply them, now they're allowed to be, you can take it to court for not supplying the records. There's, legislation proposed or maybe passed that the government body could be responsible for paying legal fees. Even if you're ultimately providing information, if you didn't provide it in a timely enough manner, could be responsible for the legal fees and the requester and then take you to court.
So,
Right now, that means, my own opinion is it's very much tilted. Public.
correct. That's my concern, which I applaud the public for the interest. I'm saying when you have a handful of people that are costing the county money, that's when is the county warranted in saying, okay, enough is enough. This is a harassment level. And so if we can keep track of that cost and say, okay, so this is how much these people are costing the county, what do we need to do about it further? Does there need to be state legislation changed? What can we do about it as a board? Because ultimately we're here to safeguard the taxpayers, not a handful of people, especially if they're non-constituents of our county. So that's where I'm trying to do that balance of safeguarding and our employees also, as well as our taxpayers. So thank you for entertaining that.
Yes.
I agree. In a perfect world, there would be some level that it does rise to, no, damn it, you just can't keep doing this. But when it's legal to request without telling your name or anything, there's nothing you can do to stop that.
Yeah.
Because you can't say, well, you're the same guy that asked for this last week.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. It's a very difficult situation.
So what is the situation that our employees are put in though? Do they have to respond within that same day or are they given an allotted time? Okay.
Yeah. General rule of thumb is 10 days.
Okay.
That's kind of what we have, that's what we advise that. Some things take longer, so the expectation that we communicate that to the requester. Tell them that we're working on it or when they get expected.
Okay.
Or like I said, some things we try to say, okay, got your request. Be more specific, maybe we can get this accomplished quicker.
Okay. So our employees are all trained in that so that they're not thinking they have to drop what they're doing to help that person that, okay.
I think so. I'll bring it up again. We just did records discussion on departments for the last months. Like to kind of try to centralize it. Letting Lynn know, especially Lynn's on the meeting when usually we get requests.
And some,
They have picked up. We're getting requests for
What if it's a non-formal request? Like if they just go to the department head and say, I want this information, they can't do that, correct?
They can.
They can. Okay.
And that's maybe we ask for it, you can ask for it ready, but even if it's the formal request, we still want to consider the request.
Mhm.
but we don't have to drop what we're doing
No.
to
Right.
perform it. And sometimes those requests take 3 departments to
Mhm.
fulfill. So what we try to do is determine which departments that we have to contact and tell them that once we know how much time for research it'll be taking, then we'll get back to them with a fee.
Yep. Thank you for doing that. I know it's extra work. I just think it's important that we're tracking that.
Anybody have anything else? Oh, something else, Andy, is Public Works was dealing with Rebecca. Lawyer. And we were negotiating cell tower. I think this kind of got dropped. I don't recall if ever resolved anything or if we just left them the way we were.
At that time, I thought they were trying to do some buyouts.
Yeah.
And then we decided, no, we were not going to do that. So we just continued the lease. And right now we're working across with Greg Peterson. And we'll end up talking to Mike about the most recent request for cell tower information.
I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I figured you probably weren't. That's why I brought it up. Thank you, Lynn. All right, anything else? Meeting adjourned. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you.
I'll talk to Ron about that.